Easter, in a way, is intrusive. I can remember some years ago, before we came here, before we came to our previous parish, for quite some time back, the kids were probably 2 years old at the oldest. I was getting up early on Easter Sunday, getting around for sunrise service. I think Esther was just starting to wake up, and I'm pretty sure I remember I was starting to tie my shoes, and the doorbell rang. Now you have to understand in the context of getting around for a sunrise service, I'm getting up at about 5 o'clock in the morning. And it was probably between 5 and 5:30 the doorbell rang. And I'm thinking, who in the world could that be? Now at the time we lived in a very small town that was right on the interstate, and it was kind of known for people stopping through that, needed help. And what I always called the good old boys club at the gas station. Apparently, at one point, they were in the habit of saying, "Oh, well, the Methodist preacher, he went right up there on that hill." So that was the first thing that popped into my mind. So I go to the door, and it was my father and my stepmother. They came to bring Easter baskets to my kids. It was unannounced. It was unexpected. And it even threw a bit of a small wrench into my getting around routine. And I remember it fondly. It forced me to stop and get my brain out of work mode for a moment and remember, this is Easter. This is Easter. And as I like to say, and in the future you'll hear me say this probably about every year. Hopefully it won't get annoying. But I like to say that on this of all days, those who are called by the name of Christ, wherever they are and in whatever circumstances they may face, should be altogether happy. Imagine, if you will, being in the sandals of Mary Magdalene or one of the other women that the other gospel writers acknowledge were there. There are some people out there who made a big deal out of some of the differences in the accounts of the resurrection. That doesn't bother me at all. What I told them up in Williamsville is because there was several weeks ago they had a tornado go through town or over the town. That if you lined up 15 people in Williamsville and asked them all to describe the storm event that happened, you would get 15 different accounts of what happened. To me, what is more remarkable about the four gospel accounts is how similar and how very close they are all on the key things. Number one, being all of them agreed, none of the men went there first. It was the ladies. And if you really dig into what that means in a weird oxymoronic way, it lends more credence to the gospel accounts. Because if someone wanted to make something up, they would not say that it was the women who saw it all. Because in those days, a woman's testimony had little to no validity in court or in public proceedings. So it's funny, but in this kind of weird oxymoron way, because it was the ladies who saw it first, it lent even more credence to the good news. So again, imagine if you were Mary Magdalene or one of the other women there that day, or Peter or John. But all of the gospel accounts show is that they were all in grief. They were dealing with many feelings: sadness, anger, probably even feelings of betrayal because the Messiah wasn't supposed to die, denial, and things like that. And it may seem hard to reconcile, but we as humans, we become so accustomed to bad news and pain, I think that we accept it as the norm. Just as they did that day, they were not expecting to see a risen Jesus. Mary was going there to finish preparing the body. We'll get to that in a minute. But we tend to be this way. We're so accustomed to bad news and pain. Oh, the world is a mess. Did you hear about pick which politician, state politician, federal politician, local politician? Did you hear what they said in the press conference? Have you seen the cost of everything lately? Did you see the latest about the war in take your pick? But if you think about it, we get so absorbed by the bad that I think good news comes as an interruption. And it sure seems to have on that day. As I was saying, Mary had gone to the tomb to finish the embalming of Jesus' body due to the coming Sabbath on Good Friday. She wasn't able to finish. She had, and the other women had to stop short. They had to go and finish it later. Mary had gone to the tomb there for the purpose of very painful work. But that is where her mind would have been. She would have been prepared in her mind, knowing that what she was going to have to do was going to be grief-stricken work. And suddenly she sees an empty tomb. And her response? Go to Peter and the others and say, the body's been stolen. Of course she isn't thinking about resurrection. She's still living in the world of bad news. And let's face it, bad news is bad, but it's predictable and it's consistent. Peter and John run to the tomb and they look in, and we get this sense that they are confused because it says that they now believe that they had not understood all that Jesus had said before. Once again, they have been interrupted in their routine of suffering and grief by something unexpected. Then we see the disciples all locked up in the upper room. They are afraid that they're going to be next on the chopping block. Because, yes, again, bad news is bad, but at least it's predictable and it's consistent. They knew what had happened to Jesus, and they are afraid that they are next. And suddenly, Jesus is with them. The ultimate interruption of the regular routine of bad news. In our world today, we have a laundry list of reasons to be miserable. Wars, world hunger, divisiveness in our society and churches, brokenness in families, addiction, bad diagnosis, bad economy, you name it. But for some reason, we kind of come to expect it, do we not? The pain of our world makes us pessimistic. But that is why, thank God, Easter comes anyway. Mary stands grieving at the tomb, not understanding what is going on, and then she turns to whom she assumes to be the gardener. In a later series, I'll talk more on this sometime. But she turns and she thinks this guy is the gardener, and she finds that it is Jesus, alive again. Her world of bad news has been overturned by the good news of Jesus. The crucifixion, the horror of that day, that Friday, is now undone by the man standing in front of her. The enemy did its worst, but Easter came anyway. The disciples, cowering in fear, are suddenly confronted by the risen Jesus. And Jesus is saying to them, "Peace be with you." Something so new and novel, true peace. And with the breath, He gives them the Holy Spirit. They had been consumed with fear. And Jesus intrudes on their fear to bring them peace. The world seemed out to get them, but Easter came anyway. In our lives today, what is it that seems to be dominating your mind? What is the bad news that weighs most on your heart? Hear this. Yes, we are more divided than ever as a society and nation. But Easter came anyway. We are living in a time of global conflict, the likes of which we thought was left in the distant past. But Easter comes anyway. We are uncertain about how to get by in an ever more difficult economy, but Easter comes anyway. We live in a world where we can hit a button and see all of the pain and hurt of humanity and feel crippled by the fear, but Easter comes anyway. Now, I'm not saying this as a palliative. I'm not saying this to say, oh, well, yes, everything is terrible, but at least we have Easter. No, I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying that all of those things that I just mentioned that weigh down on us so much, they cause so much fear and worry and sadness and grief, they no longer mean anything. Because today, just as nearly 2,000 years ago, in the midst of the darkness of the world, Easter came anyway. Jesus is alive, and those things no longer hold sway. The enemy wants you to believe that we live in a world of bad news, but Jesus' resurrection stands to the contrary. The bad news is being undone. Just as Jesus coming out of the tomb undoes the heartache of Good Friday, so it undoes the pain of the world. It may not seem like it at first glance, but Jesus defeated death before anyone else knew. Mary and Peter and John go to the tomb expecting to see death, but death had already been defeated. And it is defeated today. The world just hasn't gotten the memo yet. And so that is where you come in. The world still is acting like bad news is still the norm. The tyrants of the world are still acting like they are in control, but they're not. The world is still acting like bad news is still in control. That it is bad, but predictable. It's time for the church to be disruptive and intrusive to the norm. Shake things up a bit. Jesus has already conquered death and hell. Our job is to go and tell the world about it. Tell the world that all of the bad news doesn't mean anything anymore. That they can experience a new world and a new life right now through Jesus. And Jesus has promised to come again, and He is making all things new. Because in spite of it all, in spite of all the heartache of this broken world, Easter came anyway. Thanks be to God. He is risen. As we get ready